After explaining the symbolism of the Lord's Supper, Paul turns to the importance of proper preparation for remembering the Lord. Not by trying to stop them coming together to break bread, but with a desire that they do it in a manner that is fitting. In order to deal with the two problems that he identified earlier in the chapter, Paul highlights two things that they were to consider. First, in verses 27 to 32, the need for scrutiny of self before the Lord's Supper. And second, in verses 33 and 34, the need for sensitivity to others at the Lord's Supper. Now, we're going to read those verses from 1 Corinthians and chapter 11. Wherefore, whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. For he that eateth and drinketh unworthily eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. For if we would judge ourselves, we should not be judged. But when we are judged, we are chastened of the Lord, that we should not be condemned with the world. Wherefore, my brethren, when you come together to eat, tarry one for another. And if any man hunger, let him eat at home, that ye come not together unto condemnation. And the rest will I set in order when I come. I've never been invited to a royal event, and at this stage of life, it's unlikely that I ever will be. However, I understand that those who are invited are expected to attend in a manner that is befitting the occasion, and generally speaking, they put some effort into ensuring that they are properly prepared. And I think that we all understand that, and if invited, we would accept it. Now, the same, of course, is true of the Lord's Supper. It is at the invitation of the Lord Jesus, and it is important that we come properly prepared. Let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup, Paul writes in verse 28. We ought not to eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily, verse 27. The idea is an unworthy attitude of heart, an unworthy or improper manner. It is plain to us all that we aren't worthy of such an honour and never will be, but we ought to come with a proper attitude of humility so that we are able to show the Lord's death, verse 26, appropriately. We must not treat it in the disdainful way that the Corinthians did. That is where this examination of heart comes in. We should take time in advance to be prepared in two ways. Negatively, in the way that the children of Israel were to remove leaven from their homes in order to keep the Passover, we should confess sin, in other words. And then positively, in the way that they came together, the children of Israel came together to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Every man shall give as he is able according to the blessing of the Lord thy God, Deuteronomy 16 verse 17. That is, we should bring something to offer in thanksgiving at the remembrance. It is not a trivial matter to treat the Lord's Supper casually, and how important it is that we remember this. The Corinthians' behaviour had had very chastening results, and they actually seemed to be oblivious to that. Paul wrote, "For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep," in verse 30. The Lord had actually been disciplining them, and they appeared not to have realised. That's why Paul then urged a spirit of self-examination. If we would judge ourselves, we should not be judged, verse 31. And that is something that we also ought to do. It's not that we should be constantly beating ourselves up, but we should come with a clear sky between us and our God. We should come in fellowship with our brethren and sisters, and we should have hearts that are filled with an appreciation of the Lord Jesus. We should be able to show the Lord's death until he comes.